Happy New Year, everyone. I'm your host, Ben Lorica, and welcome to the Data Exchange Podcast. And today we do our annual look into the trends that will impact AI teams moving forward in 2025. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Part 1, Generative AI for the Enterprise. And the first topic I want to emphasize here is the need to master post-training for enterprise AI. So the idea here is most AI teams will probably not be training models from scratch. So post-training will refer to the process of optimizing and adapting any pre-trained foundation model for your specific application or task. So you can think of things like supervised fine-tuning, which I think many teams have begun to do using their own handcrafted, curated data set that is something they gathered for their specific application or use case. Or it could involve advanced topics like reinforcement learning from human feedback, which you associate more with probably alignment, right? So getting your AI aligned for and compliant for your specific domain or use case. But it can also include things like optimizing the models for deployment, right? So quantization, distillation. So since most AI teams will not be training models from scratch, I think that the topic this year will be building and optimizing their tools for post-training. So one of the things that will come up more and more as you build AI applications and agents, right? So is that the need for your own targeted benchmarks and eval tools. So when companies want to use AI in their business, the first thing they need to do is figure out what model will work best for my specific needs. And until now, most teams relied on academic tests to score AI systems, right? So, or at least to filter the universe of foundation models to a handful of things they can evaluate. So a recent study from Databricks actually revealed a significant disconnect between these academic benchmarks and real-world enterprise performance. So they didn't stop there. They developed a suite of benchmarks, which they call Domain Intelligence Benchmark Suite. And these were evaluations that covered 9 tasks, focus on data extraction, tool use, and agent workflows. So this is just the first step. I suspect that there will be more benchmarks targeted at real-world enterprise applications. But it is something that more teams should focus on. How do I get better at post-training? And what are the evaluation tools and benchmarks that I should be developing on my own? Next, I want to highlight the AI-powered developer and coding tools. Believe it or not, even at this stage, I still hear people saying that, yeah, there's too much hype about AI and software. It's really basically just a autocomplete tool. But I can tell you, survey data does not agree with this, right? So, I mean, I think earlier this year, Stack Overflow did their annual developer survey, and enthusiasm for AI coding assistants and coding tools is overwhelming, right? So 83% reported increase in productivity, 63%, so close to 2/3, are already using or planning to use AI tools. And so in my own work, which is mainly focused on machine learning and data engineering, I can't imagine going back to not using these tools. And the thing is, there's multiple AI models that you can use, and you can blend them. You can use one to suggest code, you can use one to debug code, and so on. So I think for me, the more interesting question is what's the next step, right? So people are using this already to not only write code, but to explore massive code bases or even to help them fix bugs, right? So what is the next step? So I recently took a look at an area that I am completely unfamiliar with, which is full stack web development. And I broke down the steps, the typical steps in a workflow. And what I found is that there are various coding assistants that target various stages of the full stack web development workflow. But I think the next step for these tools is to basically go and help actual full stack web developers do the end-to-end workflow, right? So from start to beginning, use the same coding assistant to help them actually build a web application from start to finish, all within the confines of the same AI coding assistant. I think we'll begin to see that across many different software engineering areas. And but on the other hand, I do want to caution that these tools are not replacements for experienced engineers, right? That's why there's all sorts of contests and benchmarks that are still being released in order to push these AI models towards improving their capacity to help software engineers and software developers. The next topic is Agentic AI and AI agents. So I think that this year we started hearing more about agents, and that will just continue even more so in 2025. For one thing, there are 400 vendors currently developing AI agent solutions, and more and more people are building kind of the infrastructure that will help you build and evaluate and manage these agents. I think risk management has been less at the forefront, and I would like to see that more so, and I believe that will happen, especially as these agents start taking on more important tasks. Multimodal foundation models will help these agents as well, because rather than just being able to do text-oriented jobs, they will be able to do things that involve computer vision or things that involve interacting with your screen, right? So, yeah, one of the things that's interesting is that the foundation model builders are recognizing that interacting with graphical user interfaces is a big part of what knowledge workers do today, and so they're beginning to build tools that will enable agents to do just that. So that'll be interesting to monitor. I'd like to see more progress in that area, frankly. And so nothing new necessarily, but I think more progress in this direction, and more announcements from foundation model builders that they will explicitly build tools to enable agents. So more companies, I believe, this year will wake up to the fact that they need flexibility and scalability in their AI infrastructure. Why is that? Well, you've heard me talk about post-training. Post-training usually involves running experiments, and these experiments can be computationally intensive, right? So in order to do that, you need to have a platform that is basically allows you to go through huge amounts of unstructured data, usually for pre-processing and data processing, but also think about if part of your post-training involves computing things like embeddings. Those are very computationally intensive. So you need something that will also enable you to deploy your models efficiently, manage your resources, valuable computational resources efficiently, and basically enable you to build what you want while reducing your operational costs. So one project that has emerged as kind of a de facto choice as being the AI compute engine for many leading teams is Ray, which you can find at ray.io. So anyway, so I think that this year more companies will end up investing in their AI platforms, making sure they have the flexibility and scalability to tackle large-scale experiments. AI and security. So AI serves as both a threat and solution in cybersecurity. And on the solution side, AI-powered security solutions are growing in importance, and companies are starting to use AI security tools to, for example, combat sophisticated cybersecurity attacks, and also, I guess, protect against AI-related vulnerabilities as well, right? So they're using AI to protect their AI models. And one category that I think has emerged over the last year, given the improvements in these video generation tools, are deepfakes and the need for deepfake detection tools. And I think most of the time when we talk of deepfakes, we tend to think of them in terms of social media or offline impersonation, right? Someone will post a video impersonating some important person, right? But I predict that actually this year we'll see a new category of tools in security, which will be the real-time deepfake detection tools. And why do I believe this? Well, for one thing, the deepfake generation tools are increasingly becoming real-time, right? So you can now have tools that will allow you to do speech-to-speech synthesis in real time, allowing bad actors to impersonate important people in real time. So as this becomes more prevalent, obviously you need your deepfake detectors to be real time as well, right? So for example, if someone starts to impersonate a CEO or CFO via a phone call, so you want to be able to do that in real time instead of just having your deepfake detection tools operate in batch. So AI and security is going to be, again, a hot topic in 2025. Part 2, Applied AI Innovations for 2025. Research areas which I think will be interesting to people building real-world AI applications. Number 1 is synthetic data for enterprise AI. So compute continues to get better. So we have better hardware, better models, and better tools for managing large clusters, including ray.io. But data is not growing at the same rate. So as many people have observed, we have used up all of the data in the internet, or at least the people building foundation models have basically scraped all of the data available online. And so data is the fossil fuel of AI, as many people have observed. And now we are using it all up. So synthetic data is an area that people are speculating is a potential solution. And in fact, some of the people building foundation models have hinted that they are using synthetic data. And so the question is, what does that mean for those of us who are not building foundation models? Well, I think to some extent, I'm sure many of our listeners have already dabbled in synthetic data, even if they don't call it that. So think about the number of times you've used one of these frontier models like GPT-4 to generate synthetic data to fine-tune a model for your application. So the point here is that this is an area of active exploration, not just for researchers, but for practitioners. So I would suggest that this is an area where I think I'm a little bit hopeful, because the people building foundation models are pressed to make something out of nothing, so to speak. So whatever tools they build, I'm sure we will be the beneficiaries of. So even if those synthetic data generation tools are not directly made available to us, those synthetic data generation tools will translate into better foundation models, which we can then use to generate our own synthetic data. So some related areas here, it's the fact that large enterprises, some of them have lots of data. I believe that JP Morgan has hinted that they have lots of data that they can throw at generative AI. So in general, you yourself may already have data that you want to make available to generative AI models. But as I will note later, that might mean that you will have to revisit your data processing and data preparation tools. Another area that's related is data augmentation, and the most direct manifestation of that is to get relevant data for your application or your use case through partnerships or through licensing deals. So, but generally the overall theme here is that synthetic data is an area of active exploration for researchers. So I expect that we in the real world who are building practical AI applications will be beneficiaries. Number two are the so-called reasoning enhanced AI models, mainly initiated by OpenAI with their O1 release. So the idea here is that these models are evolving from intuition-driven models that are great at pattern recognition but are often unreliable and sometimes prone to errors, to systems with built-in reasoning. And the concept here is that these models will be able to self-correct, detect hallucinations, and make more reliable decisions. So that means you don't need so much human oversight, which is great for enterprise AI applications. So with the release of O1, you started seeing a competitive response from other players. So for example, DeepSeek and Alibaba have also hinted at and released preliminary models that are in this reasoning enhanced category. So one drawback of these models is, one, as many of you have used O1 or or variants related to O1, is that they're slow, right? Because they have to think and ponder before they respond, which means actually operationally they're much more expensive to operate and require much more energy. So for example, you can see this in just the cost that OpenAI is charging, right? So OpenAI, I think, charges $15 per 750,000 words analyzed and $60 for generation. So this is 6 times more than GPT-4. So there's some debate over whether or not these are really displaying true reasoning capabilities. But I think based on my experience and what I've been able to glean from other people's experience is that, O1 in particular is is great at certain tasks and is really an advance in certain tasks, but may have been a step back in certain areas, right? But it's clear that this is a development that will persist, that other foundation model builders will probably move in this direction, because I do think that users have responded positively overall to OpenAI's o1. So the question is the long-term viability, given that it's expensive to operate and that it costs so much energy. And also, will these models mean more concentration? Will this mean that the open models will be less competitive? I personally don't believe this is going to be the case. I believe the open models will keep pace, but we'll see what happens. But I do think that this year more applications, particularly I suspect agentic AI applications, will start using these reasoning enhanced foundation models. Next topic to pay attention to in 2025 is scaling and compute optimization for AI. I've already hinted at this in the previous item. With the rise of more advanced models, so including reasoning enhanced models, but also the visual language models that are much more multimodal. These types of models will require significantly more compute during inference, not just training. So 2025, I hope to see more innovations in both hardware and software that will effectively mitigate the challenges of inference time scaling. So the phrase to pay attention to in 2025 will be inference scaling or inference time scaling. But either way, both of them mean that we are in need of more innovation on the operation of these foundation models. The next item is AI hardware diversification. It seems like this is something I've been talking about now for 2 years, which is the emergence of alternatives to NVIDIA, particularly for training these foundation models. And let me be clear, NVIDIA will remain the leader in the space for the foreseeable future. AMD's GPUs are quite good. They do have an open source software stack called ROCm, which I have written about, that some startups have gotten to work, particularly for inference. Some have even gotten it to work for training. But there were recent real-world performance studies that really kind of highlight the need for the maturity of the ROCm software stack. So what these studies showed was that NVIDIA was quite easy to use. So out of the box experience was very close to the NVIDIA's published benchmarks, whereas AMD's GPUs, in conjunction with its ROCm software stack, were not as pleasant to use, required a lot of work, and even then may not have come close to the benchmarks published by AMD. So anyway, so AMD I think is aware of all of this, so they are working on improving their software stack, ROCm, and hopefully there will be other software tools like Triton out of OpenAI, which is open source, which will also help people use other hardware besides NVIDIA. So, but on the other hand, NVIDIA is not sitting on its laurels, right? So it's already pre-announced for its conference in 2025 a new set of chips, which, if you read between the lines, might be quite amenable for these reasoning enhanced models. So especially for reasoning enhanced model inference. So we'll see. We'll see what they actually release this year. And of course, there's these AI-specific ASICs. Cerebrus has impressive performance numbers and real-world use cases. Another area where I think the NVIDIA alternatives are going to try to make a dent is in energy efficiency. So, for example, I've read articles that Apple, especially, is not that pleased with NVIDIA GPUs, particularly because they're such energy hogs. So, on device, Apple will explore their own offerings, probably. They already made that massive step for replacing Intel on their laptops, right? So the next step for them is to figure out what to do for AI inference on device that is more energy efficient. So other companies that are kind of hinting that they are going to try to do something more energy efficient than NVIDIA are Broadcom and ARM, which is now owned by SoftBank. So hardware diversification. I know I sound like a broken record about this, but pay attention to NVIDIA's competitors in 2025. Final item in this section is open models. So I anticipate open models to remain competitive with proprietary foundation models in 2025. So this should enable enterprises to build more cost-efficient applications and also where they have greater control and flexibility. And so I would design my AI applications to be model agnostic to avoid vendor lock-in. So you've heard me talk about reasoning enhanced models, but even in that area, proprietary models are not going to be alone. I think DeepSeek and Alibaba have already hinted at that their latest models are reasoning enhanced. The other area that I'm interested in are the so-called visual language models that can process both visual and textual inputs. And so I believe that open models will also be competitive there. So takeaway here is design your models to be model agnostic so you can swap models with ease, and so that allows you to lower your costs and exert more control. Part 3. Next-Gen Data Foundations for Generative AI. This area is so important that I actually dedicated a whole deep dive video to the topics in this area, which you can find in our YouTube channel, and you should take a look. But at a high level, there are 3 topics here. One is the shifts in data tools for generative AI. So the paradigm shifts being that the data processing will go from SQL to AI-centric frameworks, and they will be designed to handle multimodal data. The second is real-time data integration for AI applications, mostly operational data, but also unstructured data. And then finally, the importance of unlocking structure in unstructured data. Tongue-in-cheek, I wrote an article about this a while back called "Structure is All You Need." So again, these topics are super important for enterprise AI teams in 2025. So important that I dedicated a whole video to them. So check our YouTube video. It will be the video preceding this episode. Part 4. Policy and Regulatory Landscape. Item number 1 is semiconductor export controls. So the Biden administration in its last days is tightening export controls to China. So now they've included more controls for high bandwidth memory for example, and expanded the controls on certain tools for making chips. So the question here is, what will the Trump administration do? And as I've noted in a recent article, as far as export controls, there's only three choices. The first choice is a completely open approach, no export controls, in other words, but I don't think that's tenable given what happened in solar panels and electric vehicles, where the West basically has ceded strategic advantages that took them decades to build. The second option is a much more aggressive approach, which will be comprehensive countrywide restriction, which will be easy to implement because basically if you're a Chinese entity, you fall under the export control. And then finally, the third option, which is what the Biden administration has done, is a middle ground, which is targeted restrictions on specific technologies and entities. So this is kind of the thread the needle approach. But the problem with this thread the needle approach is it requires precise execution, right? And there's risk of stockpiling and retaliation as well. So the thing to pay attention here is, what will the Trump administration do moving forward? And can the U.S. hold together its alliance comprised of the West plus Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan? Number 2, the EU AI Act versus the US. So actually, recently, the outgoing head of the US Department of Homeland Security, Secretary Mayorkas, he raised significant concerns about the diverging approaches to AI regulation between the US and Europe. And he also highlighted Europe's more adversarial relationship with tech companies. And he believes this is a potential threat to global AI security and governance. So this warning comes as the EU implements this comprehensive AI Act, while the US is much more flexible, voluntary in its approach to AI oversight. And of course, now we have the incoming Trump administration, which is signaling a much more flexible approach. They're much more friendly to deregulation than even the Biden administration is. So we'll see what happens there in terms of the EU AI Act and the Trump administration. Next up is US deregulation challenges. So I am of the camp that some deregulation in the US will be welcome. I think that the Biden administration was a bit too heavy-handed at times when it came to technology, AI, and particularly crypto. So I think some loosening is definitely welcome. And I think some of the early appointments in the Trump administration are give me reason for hope. So the concern that some people that I follow have expressed is that hopefully whatever deregulation agenda they come up with will be even-handed. So in other words, it's a deregulation aimed at everyone, and so it will be a level playing field. So no favoritism towards specific companies and no targeting of specific companies, right? So one cause of caution is a proposal that some in the incoming administration have expressed about removing crash reporting for self-driving cars. So I guess the NHTSA, National Highway Transportation Safety Administration in the US, requires self-driving cars to report crashes. So the Trump administration has signaled that they may want to do away with that. And that causes some safety concerns. So Deregulation is broadly welcome, but hopefully it'll be even-handed and no favoritism and no targeting. AI talent and immigration reform. Immigration policies will be a strong determinant of how well the US sustains its AI leadership. I did a quick research, and if you look at the Manhattan Project in World War II, over 20% of the people in the teams involved in the Manhattan Project were foreign-born researchers. And I think conservatively, the estimate of the proportion of foreign-born researchers in AI is much higher in these leading AI labs. So I think that the early signals from the Trump administration is that they might be more welcoming than previously thought when it comes to skilled talent, particularly in key areas like AI. But this is an area that we should all monitor, because basically this is important, not just for how we staff our teams, but how the US is able to sustain its AI leadership moving forward. And we're all dependent on foundation models that emanate mainly from US AI labs. The rise of AI alignment platforms. So I believe that in 2025, legal sign-off will be essential for AI deployments. So before you deploy your model, you'll need to get a sign-off from your legal team. So you heard me mention about the EU AI Act, but there's also a bunch of US state AI rules that are being proposed. And some, like the Colorado's AI Act, are already scheduled to come online. So actually, this complicates compliance for US companies regardless of what the Trump administration and the EU end up doing and come to agreement to with regards to the EU AI Act. So this kind of hodgepodge of US state AI rules will be a challenge. So historically, if you look in the past in data privacy, teams end up adopting the strictest regional laws, right? So because basically, if you're going to comply, let's comply to the strictest rule and go from there, and then we're automatically compliant with others, right? But it's actually hard to comply with some of these rules because they involve making sure that different teams are working together and coordinating well. And so in an earlier post, myself and the founders of Luminos.ai sketched out a vision for how to make this much easier. And we call this the AI alignment platforms. And I think they will be critical for achieving unified compliance globally. Thank you for joining us on this special episode of the Data Exchange Podcast, where we outline important trends for AI in 2025. So if you haven't yet, please join the thousands of people who subscribe to our newsletter. And if you like the show, please subscribe and rate us through Apple Podcasts or Overcast or TuneIn.com or Spotify and never miss an episode. I'll be back next week and we will do this all over again.